Hey, this is Mad Movie Mark with the Mad Movie Mark Movie Review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 1953 drama thriller Wages of Fear. I think we're going to have a great review today. Hey, that's not true. I think we're going to have a really good review. I'm reviewing every movie that has 100% fresh rated Rotten Tomatoes. I'm giving them all a score of 1 to 10. After I watch them and score them all, I will rank them from worst to best. I started in the 1920 silent movie era, and now I'm at 1953 with The Wages of Fear. And when I opened up this review, I said it was a drama thriller, and I would like to emphasize the thriller on this movie. This is probably the most suspenseful movie I've ever seen in my life, the most on the edge of my seat I've ever been, and I can't think of a movie that will ever be any more suspenseful and thrilling than this. Wow, this was a ride. This was such a fantastic, amazing ride. All right, so this movie stars Yves Montand as Mario, Charles M. Vanel as Mr. Joe, Peter Van Eck as Bimba, Folo Luli as Luigi, and Vera Clouseau as Linda. She is the real-life wife of the director of this movie. It has a 100% fresh rating from the critics and a 95% fresh rating from the audience, which is a really high score. Was it high enough from the audience? I don't know. Maybe not. So when we start in this movie, I would say the first 40 minutes of this movie is world building. It's really telling you what kind of city, what kind of country these people live in. This is a very poor country. They live in a very poor city in the country. The people who live there, a lot of them, especially the men of the country, were promised jobs. They were promised good pay, and when they got there, there was really nothing for them.
Si me dicen a mí que un día va a llorar por trabajo.
Para los gandules nunca hay trabajo.
There is an American oil drilling company that is kind of owns the town. They supply a lot of the work in the town, and they're your typical American in a movie where they come in, they just take everything over, they rob the land of the riches, they rob the land of the natural resources, and they just they're just taking over everything, which isn't too out of character for America. But when we first start this movie, we are shown the main cast. So we first run into Mario, Bimba, and Luigi. Now Mario and Bimba, they are somewhat lazy. Bimba, especially at first, is categorized as someone who's lazy, who doesn't really want to work that hard. Mario, we're not sure. Mario is someone who is kind of a fast talker, maybe doesn't want to work as hard either, but wants to find some sort of reasonable job. He was born in Italy, and he would like to leave where he's at and go back to Italy. He is a bit homesick, and we find this out even more so when Mr. Joe enters the movie. So Mr. Joe is someone who seems like he's maybe on the run from some sort of authorities. When he enters the movie, he's coming off a plane. He slips a $10 bill in his passport so that they will let him go on his way, so they won't stop him when he's going through this custom checkpoint.
Poco pasaporte, ¿eh?
Sí, pasaporte.
¿Qué vienes a hacer tú aquí, eh?
No sé, Antevilla.
And when he gets to this town, he is driving in a taxi. He seems like he's someone who could just throw money around, but he is very poor as well. He doesn't have any money. Him and Mario, they hit it off really quickly because they're both from Italy. They both live there. They both come from there. So Mario kind of looks up to him in the first part of this movie. Mario, it almost seems like he idolizes him a little bit. Now, Luigi is Mario's roommate. Luigi has a pretty decent job. He does something with concrete. He mixes concrete, but he's told by his doctor that his lungs are full of concrete and that he just cannot do this anymore. If he continues doing this job that he's doing, he will only have maybe 6 months to a year left to live because it's really destroying his health. So in the beginning of this movie, we really see how down on their luck they are, how they just everyone needs some sort of leg up. They need something that'll get them out of the trenches, something that'll get them out of poverty. There's a scene where Luigi and Mr. Joe in the beginning have somewhat of a disagreement with each other. Luigi walks into this bar where Mr. Joe and Mario are sitting, and he tries to one-up Mario by buying everyone drinks, and apparently Mr. Joe takes some offense to this, so he opens up a bottle of champagne and squirts all of them, and then ends up pulling a gun on Luigi. So in the beginning, he seems like he's a really tough guy. He's the tough person in this movie, and him, as well as everyone else, they just need a leg up, and he's going to get it. He's going to go after it no matter what he needs to do, no matter who he has to double cross, what he has to do, because he wants out of this town and he wants money. Now, there's a big fire at the in a town a little bit out of the way. I think they said it's like 400 miles or something from where they are, at one of the oil rigs that the Americans have set up. And they need to get nitroglycerin delivered to this fire so they can get the fire out. The only problem is that there's no safe way to deliver this nitroglycerin from the town to this oil derrick, because they don't have the equipment that they need. They're underfunded. They really have nothing. So the Americans who are in charge of this oil derrick, the main guy who's in charge, he says, you know what, we're just going to hire a bunch of the people from the town to do it. I know it's a suicide mission, but there's no union there. They have no families. No one's going to miss them if they happen to blow up while they're delivering this nitroglycerin. So we're going to have them deliver it, and we'll just keep having people try until they're successful.
Keep trying till one gets through. That'll be enough.
And you think the union's going to just sit back and let you go ahead?
The hell with the union. There are plenty of tramps in town, all volunteers. I'm not worried. To get that bonus, they'll carry the entire charge on their backs.
Is basically what he's going to, what he wants to do. So they decide they're going to load 2 trucks, and they're going to have 2 people in each truck, and they're going to try to negotiate this really tough terrain and get it to this oil derrick. And that's like the meat of the movie. The first part of the movie is just kind of describing how poor people are, how they need to get out, like how hungry they are to get out of their situation. It's real important, the first part of this movie. I think some people will see it as a little slow. Maybe some people will kind of shut off during this part of the movie, which is really sad. That you really shouldn't do that at all, because it is a little bit slow, but there's a huge payoffs in the middle and at the end of this movie where you really want to watch this. So they decide they're going to pick 4 people. Now, they pick 4 people originally without Mr. Joe as one of the 4. He takes offense to this. He has a conversation with the American, because him and the American are friends. And the American says, you know, you're too old for this. If you were younger, if I was younger, I would do this myself. But you're too old. You got to let the kids do this. You got to let the young people do this, because they're the ones who are mentally, physically, emotionally, they're ready for this type of trip, where you are not ready for this type of trip at all. He eventually manages to get himself to be one of these 4. So now the 4 people who are going are Mario, Mr. Joe, Luigi, and then the character Bemba, who in the beginning of the movie was a bit of a lazy guy. Now, to see how important this is to everyone in the town, to see how much this really meant to everyone, and how this is really, because they're given $2,000 if they make the trip. $2,000 per person who gets to the end, who actually delivers this, which is a ton of money. And to really know how much this is worth and how much this means to them, one of the kids in the movie who isn't chosen, he ends up committing suicide by hanging himself in a tree. And it's one of the more powerful parts in the movie right before they leave. It's probably the most powerful part right before they leave, to really show what this means to everyone. So the first two people in the truck, it's going to be Mario and Mr. Joe. They're leading this caravan, and then 30 minutes behind them are Bemba and Luigi. Now, they're supposed to travel 30 minutes in front of and 30 minutes behind the other car, so that it leaves leeway in case one of them blows up. It doesn't ignite the other one. So they're supposed to be 30 minutes apart. Now, early on in this movie, we see that Mario and Mr. Joe, they're kind of driving a little bit slow. Mr. Joe is driving the first leg, and he's very cautious. He's kind of scared about the prospect of blowing up, and he's driving very slowly, whereas Bemba and Luigi, who are supposed to be behind them, they're driving very fast. Eventually, they meet with each other. Mario and Mr. Joe decide to let Bemba and Luigi go ahead of them, so they go ahead of them. The first real test of how they're going to be able to drive and if they're going to be able to do this, there's a really bumpy stretch of road that they have to travel, and they said it's like kind of like a shed where the shed is really curvy. That's kind of how the road is. And their suggestion is you take the road very quickly. So if you take the road really fast, you're supposed to be able to just glide past the road and not take on any of the bumps that will make the nitroglycerin blow up. Now, there's also another thing you could do. You could take the road really slowly, like at 1 mile an hour, and that way nothing bumps and bangs around too much, and you can get through it that way as well. Now, both of these trucks, both of these teams, they aren't going to do very slow. They want to get through this quickly. They want to get to the other side very fast. They want to get their money. They're on kind of a time crunch. The guy from the United States said, every minute is another dollar. So they want to get through this as fast as they can in the best way that they can. So they each decide that they're going to take this road very quickly. Now, Bimba and Luigi, who are in the first car, they start off really quickly, but then something happens to their car to where they have to slow down to like a crawl, to like that 1 mile an hour crawl that I was talking about. Now, of course, right behind them, only supposed to be 30 minutes behind them, are Mario and Mr. Joe, and they're just going fast as they can. They say you have to get the car above 40, and that way you're fine across this very washboardy road. But of course, they're going to go 50. They're going to go 60. They're going to push it as fast as they can go. And they push it so fast that they get right on the bumper of Bimba and Luigi, who are going slow. And it's almost just going to hit each other, but then they end up not doing it.
Américain pour laisser tomber la vitesse.
Difficilement. Si on arrive.
I mean, they really pushed the limit here. They don't hold back. They're like, if we're going to crash, we're going to crash, and we're going to do it now. Crazy suspenseful, like on the edge of your seat. Amazing. The whole scene, the way it's shot, the way it's cinematography, the way it's carried out, like incredible. Absolutely fine piece of filmmaking. I can't tell you how amazing this shot is. So then their second obstacle they run to is even more suspenseful than the first. Probably the most suspenseful part of this movie for me, the part that really grabs you and takes hold of you. They have to turn their truck. They're going up a mountain. They're on a very high cliff of a mountain, and they have to turn their truck in a way that is too wide for them to actually go up. So they have to kind of put their truck in and then back up and then take the turn. Now, the part about this that's really difficult is what they have to back into is an old dilapidated bridge with wood that's rotting, which a truck that size can probably not even be on for a few minutes. Now, Luigi and Bimba, they work together. They're able to work together and to get their truck the way that they need and up on the mountain. But while they're doing this, part of the wood that's rotted completely falls. Like it just disintegrates, which is going to make this incredibly hard for Mr. Joe and Mario to navigate. Now, they don't work well with each other. They don't work as a team. They work against each other. Mario, at this point, is kind of the person who is taking the helm. He's taking charge, and he wants to back the truck all the way to the end of the bridge. Now, behind him is Mr. Joe, and Mr. Joe is telling him to stop because Mario is getting right to the point where he's going to hit Mr. Joe and knock him off the cliff. But Mario says, I told you I'm going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to go all the way. And he just keeps backing up. And then he gets out of the truck and you don't see Mr. Joe anymore. Like, did he fall off the cliff? What happened to him? Well, a few minutes later, we actually see him climbing up the side of the mountain, getting to the top, meaning that he's completely leaving Mario by himself to navigate the rest of this bridge and to get the truck where it needs to be. He's abandoned Mario at this point. He is worried. He's scared. He doesn't want any more part of this. He's kind of has his tail between his legs, and he says, look, I want to get out of here with my life. I don't want to die with you here, so I don't want to do this anymore.
Mario, il t'emmerde.
Mario eventually gets the truck navigated the way he needs to get the truck navigated, and he tells Mr. Joe, hey, look, we're in this together. You decide to do this. This wasn't something I forced you to do. We're a team and we have to get through this together. Mr. Joe reluctantly says okay to this, but the rest of the movie, he's basically like a walking zombie, a walking corpse. Like, he no longer has any passion for this. He no longer believes he's actually going to live at the end of this. Like, he no longer believes in what they're doing. And, he's basically pretty much dead weight for the rest of the trip. Now, the third obstacle that they get to is a boulder in the middle of a road that they're not. The boulder is huge. It's like hundreds and thousands of tons. That's definitely something they can't move on their own. And when they get to it, so Bimba and Luigi still are in the front, they're still the front car. When they get there, they kind of think that, well, this is where we stop. We can't get past this boulder. There's nothing we can do. But they realize that what they could do is they could take a pole off the truck and dig a very large hole into the middle of this boulder, fill a canteen with nitroglycerin, and then explode it from a distance by setting up this system where a hammer can drop in the middle of the nitroglycerin and blow it up. So this is a very dangerous thing to do. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to survive this, but Luigi and Bimba decide that this is the only way to do it. So they end up letting Mario and Mr. Joe know what they're doing. They tell them to get back. They explode the boulder successfully, and Luigi very narrowly escapes with his life. He almost dies at this point. In fact, everyone thought he was dead, but he magically lives. He miraculously lives at this point. And that's pretty much most of the obstacles that they have to face.
Alors les potes, à quoi vous jouez? Tu le vois? Bimba va faire péter la montagne. Quoi? Vous êtes cinglés?
But man, I was sweating. I was sweating at the end of this obstacle. I was like, I can't take any more of this. This is too much. I'm not even in this movie, and this is too much for me. Like, I'm not one of these people, and I can't take this anymore. They're after this obstacle, they're just driving down the road, peacefully as you will, and then out of nowhere, Luigi and Bimba's truck explodes.
En blague.
They got past all these difficult obstacles. They did all these difficult things. They used their heads. They used teamwork. They were the two people in this movie that really tried their hardest, and they end up the truck ends up exploding. When Mario and Mr. Joe get there, they see that possibly this could have been from a cigarette that one of them was smoking. It somehow ignited the nitroglycerin and made their truck explode. Now there's a really terrible issue here, and a really problematic issue for Mario and Mr. Joe, and that's when the truck exploded, it just left a huge pool of gasoline and oil in the middle of this canyon where they need to go. That is almost like chest deep. That's how much oil and gasoline is here, and they need to be able to cross this to get the truck to the other side. So Mario asks Mr. Joe to go into the oil and the gasoline to see how deep it is and see if it's something that they can actually navigate. Mr. Joe goes into the oil and the gasoline, and when he gets down there, he says, it's going to be tricky. I don't think you can navigate this, but you definitely have to, once your truck is going, you have to keep going. Otherwise, the wheels are going to spin. And if you stop, you're never going to get it going again because your wheels are just going to keep spinning. There's no traction down here. There's nothing for your wheels to grab hold against. So you just have to keep going. So Mario starts driving through this pit of oil and gas. And as he's driving through it, Mr. Joe gets caught under some sort of like branch or something that's in the middle of this pool. And he's right in the path of Mario's truck. And he's screaming like, help, like stop the truck, stop, I'm pinned, I can't get out. And Mario's like, you have to move, I can't stop the truck. And Mr. Joe says, I can't move. And then Mario ends up running over, completely crushing Mr. Joe's legs. And then he has a hard time getting the truck out of the hole, out of the pit, but he eventually does it. And when he does it, he goes to Mr. Joe, and Mr. Joe is basically like dying at this point.
mon vieux! Tire-toi de là!
He can't feel his legs. His legs are completely useless. I'm assuming he's just completely bleeding out. There's oil and gas all over him. So Mario gets him in the truck, and they keep heading towards their final destination. Now they end up getting to the final destination. They end up getting to this oil derrick that they're trying to get to. They deliver the nitroglycerin, but when they get there, Mr. Joe dies of his injuries before anyone can treat him, before anyone can help him. The people at the oil derrick, they're just super excited, and they're super surprised that Mario was able to get there. They treat him like he's some sort of royalty. There's just fire everywhere. Like this whole oil field is just on fire, and flames and smoke coming up everywhere. And they end up giving Mario $4,000. They give him his cut and Mr. Joe's cut. They send him home. They send him on a truck going home with it's an empty truck. They took the nitroglycerin off of it, and then so he's in a truck driving home by himself. He doesn't have any of these obstacles to navigate anymore because they've all been navigated, and he's happy, and he's so happy he's driving the truck erratically. He's just swerving back and forth because he's just got a song in his head, and he ends up driving the truck off a cliff and dying. So he also dies, and that was heartbreaking. I really thought he was going to make it. I really thought he was going to get back to town, be like the big man, go where he wanted to go, live the rest of his life. There was going to be at least one person here who didn't meet a tragic end, but that's not how it happened at all. He dies as well, and that's how the movie ends. So I don't know if I made it clear, but I love this movie. Even though it's sad, I tend to like sad movies. I don't know why, but this movie is sad. It's heartbreaking. It's wrenching. It really tells you the story of kind of like greed, how far greed will take you. And then once you get to the point where it doesn't look like you're going to make it, the greed doesn't really matter anymore. Like Mr. Joe, he gave up at the end. He was no longer greedy. He no longer cared about the riches because he kind of knew that they weren't going to make it. So greed only got him so far, but it really propelled everyone else. This idea of having a better life, getting something better for yourself. But I mean, the only way that they can do it is risking their lives. And it really shows like how much they thought of the situation that they were in, that they really didn't think that they had any other opportunities, that they had any other choice, that life wasn't going to bring them anything else, that it was either death or riches. And it's really sad, but it's so true in this movie. I mean, the pacing of this movie is fantastic. You couldn't ask for better pacing in a movie. The cinematography is spectacular. Some of the best cinematography I've ever seen, the way this movie is shot. The acting is really good. No real acting standouts here. They're all just really good at what they're asked to do, and they're all real good at playing their parts. I would say probably Mr. Joe and Mario definitely are the two standout actors for me, but Luigi was also really good. And definitely perfect casting, I would say. They really got out of the cast what they needed to get. The writing, obviously, spectacular. Everything in this movie that was written is beautifully written. Editing, I mean, this editing is perfect. It's so perfect. That's what makes it so suspenseful, is the way this movie is edited. The music, everything is fantastic. There's only a few things in the movie I don't understand. I personally don't understand how to put out a fire with nitroglycerin, especially since the slightest touch or the slightest movement of this stuff, it explodes. So how are they actually going to get this stuff in the fire? I have no idea. And just the nitroglycerin itself, is that able to put the fire out, or is there something else that they need besides the nitroglycerin? I have no idea. And I would say besides that, everything else was fantastic. The ending, I would have loved to see one of them live at the end. And for me, my favorite person in this whole movie is Luigi, because he has the most tragic story. He's the one who is not going to live that much longer unless he gets another job. But I guess because he's not going to live that much longer, he's the most expendable in the movie, because if he dies, he was going to die anyway doing the job that he was doing. He had no other way out of this job. He had no other prospects. So I guess he was the most expendable. I had to have known if one truck was going to blow up out of all of them, it was going to be the one Bimba was in, because Bimba definitely is the one you get the least backstory for, the one that you care about the least in this movie, because he doesn't share all that much about his life, or about who he is, or about what he's doing. So I assumed that if one truck blew up, it would have been his out of all of them. But this movie is great. I give this movie a 10 out of 10. It's probably one of the higher 10s that I will give because it's just so good. I can't think of any movie that I'll ever watch that'll be more suspenseful than this. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope there is a movie that's more thrilling and another movie that's more suspenseful, but I don't see how it could happen. This movie was 2.5 hours long, and I felt like it went by in like an hour. I was that glued to my seat of what was going on. I had to go back and get clips from the movie because I screen grabbed the clips. I had to go back and watch it again just to screen grab because I wasn't doing any of that during the movie. I realized at the end of the movie, like, I have nothing to put in this review because I didn't do anything because I was just so like into what was going on. But yeah, with that being said, I give it a 10 out of 10. And thank you for joining me. I hope you join me for my next review, which is I Vitelloni. Thank you. Have a great day.